Hello, friends. Welcome to Which Aisle, where we talk about spirituality and mental health and how they cohesively work together. We are your hosts. I am Charmaine,
And I am Krystle.
and today we are going to discuss cycles. Because cycles are all around us every day, and we may not even realize it or really be mindful about the ones that are happening for us that are damaging. So, first, let's define what a cycle is. The definition is a series of events that are regularly repeated in the same order. That is what a cycle is. So, Crystal, what are your thoughts on cycles?
Well, there are a multitude of different cycles, and let's get the basics out of the way. The basics, like the circle of life. The circle of life is birth, aging, death, rebirth. That continues on and on, just like the Lion King, right? Um, you also have the cycles of the seasons. Spring turns to summer, turns to fall, turns to winter, back to spring again. And you have the moon phases. You have day and you have night. And so there's a multitude of ways that we experience cycles just in nature as the norm. And then there are other cycles. There are the cycles, I like to think, depending on how you like to look at God, or you don't believe in God, but the universe in itself, the way that the world works, it works in cycles as well. It has a way of bringing about and bringing back around things that you have not dealt with, and getting louder and louder until you decide to listen. So there's cycles around you all day long. It's just kind of tuning in to the frequency and listening to the way that those cycles are coming about in your life.
Right. It's all about awareness about where you are, really. There's so many abuse cycles that are just so common among all humans. And I don't think some of us realize it, but like one of the cycles that I have been stuck in most of my life starts with something negative happening in my life. And then when that negative thing happens and I feel bad, I blame myself for it. I jump on myself and then I beat myself up in the attempt to make myself better. But studies show again and again in psychology studies that, negatively talking to you isn't going to make you do better. That's not how that works. Uh, Positively reinforcing things is how you get better. And so my language to myself was a vicious cycle. I always used this negative language. I was always no good. I could never get my shit together. And that's such a harmful place for your mental health because what's required for your mental health is that self-compassion. And I couldn't get there because and then I had to think about, where was this coming from? Where is this language coming from? Where did I hear this language, or why do I use this language? And it all comes back to childhood and how I perceived the world around me while I was a child. And that has developed these cycles of vicious self-talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely. As children, we emulate or we mimic what is shown to us from the adults in our lives, our parents, our caregivers, our teachers, our pastors, the figures that are, most prominent. We try to emulate what we see. So if we are experiencing a lot of negative down talk towards ourselves as children, then as we grow, we mimic that negative self talk and start saying those things about ourselves because we were told the whole time we were kids that it's your fault. Why can't you do this? Why aren't you better at this? Yada, yada, yada. There's a multitude of different abuse cycles that you'll feel, but like self-talk is one of the hardest things whenever it comes to cycles and breaking those unhealthy cycles.
Oh, right. It is a very, very hard cycle to break because I'm still working on it. But I also have to take into account that I didn't really start working on my self speak, my internal dialogue until, I mean, not seriously, until about 5 years ago. So I'm only 5 years into changing it. But at that time, I was probably my early 40s. That's 41. There we go. I don't math fast. Apologize. But, 41 years of me talking to myself this way. And the thing is that, if you have a parent that expresses some disappointment in you and maybe doesn't use the proper language for the disappointment and really does make it feel like your fault, the child doesn't get angry at the parent for blaming them for something. They blame themselves and they carry that with them. And it's like a shame. It's always a shame. It's like a shameful sort of feeling that you're bringing from place to place. And that keeps you further stuck trying to heal from all of whatever happened.
Well, that kind of like I want to throw in here because we're talking about self-talk, but we're also, we already came in with how the adults around us are speaking to us as children. Let's also make a note that cycles are ancestral. So your parents or caregivers or those authority figures in your life as a child they also are mimicking what they learned, and they're mimicking what those people learned, and so on and so on. And so when we've talked about how it's sort of trauma is collected in the DNA, and they've done studies and stuff like that you've referenced before on like the dogs and the mice and whatnot.
Yes, yes.
And so I really think it's really, really important to, to say that, a lot of times the cycle, whether it's abusive self-talk, whether it's physical abuse, mental abuse, whatever the case may be, there's also an ancestral part that we have to look at too, is that that's what they were shown and what they were taught as well.
It's a generational trauma. Yep.
Generational trauma.
Yeah, that's what I was like, as I was listening to you, I'm like, yeah, that's a collective. That's a giant group of people. But then that goes right down to individual cultures. It is generational. So, the parents are just mimicking their parents. Their parents mimic their parents until somebody breaks the cycle. That's how we try to correct the situations.
Well, we know that the cycles can be generational, collective, even whatever. But let's talk about the cycle of relationships.
Okay.
How, whether it is romantic involvement or whether it's platonic friendship. This goes both ways. It's not like men are evil or women are evil or it's only about love. No, this is about relationships in general. So, for example, I have two examples. One is a relationship with romantically, and then one is platonic. So, you're a girl, you're a woman, and you're talking to your best friend, and you're letting a load of steam off. I just broke up with Bobby Joe. I don't know why he is such a jerk face. I don't know why I keep picking the same kind of man. I don't know why this keeps happening to me. Why are they all the same? Why do they all do the same thing to me? That's a cycle that you're stuck in. It is okay, what is it about you that is projecting that kind of relationship into the universe is what you, because what you project is what you receive back, right? And the same thing goes with, your girlfriend Sally is giving you a load off about all of these friends that I have. They they all use me for what I can do for them. They don't ever come to my rescue whenever I need a friend. It's always about them. It's never I never have them whenever I need to have them. Why is it that I can't find friends that are as open and willing and as good of a friend as I can be? Well, again, that is says more to you than it does to the people that you're picking as friends, because you are putting out to the universe that these are the type of people. So basically, it's a cycle that repeats and will repeat. It's basically that the universe will keep putting the same type of person, just a different meat suit in front of you to see if you're still a dumbass or if you've learned your lesson.
That is so true. It is so, so true. Um, thinking through my past, I can remember times that, I would wonder to myself, especially just before I entered like real serious therapy, I would wonder to myself, why is it that I, keep having these same set of circumstances over and over again, no matter who it is I'm with, or who it is I work with, or who it is I befriend, or any of that stuff. And uh, I had to really sit with myself, and I realized the reason why is because as I express negative into the universe, it reflects right back at me. That's what you're bringing to you. You're All that negativity is going to come back at you, and it comes back at you sometimes in the form of people that are kind of toxic. And if you're not well enough and don't have those healthy boundaries and things in place, those toxic people can just wreak havoc on your life. I was just watching a documentary on, it's like the world's worst, or it's something about the worst roommate on Netflix. And there was this, it was one show was on serial squatters, and this guy was a serial squatter. He did it to everybody. He'd come into their apartments, and then he wouldn't leave, and then he would make them uncomfortable, and sometimes get them thrown into jail. And like, it was ridiculous. But he, on the other end of it, was complaining to the people around him about his terrible roommates that he keeps getting, even though he's the one who wasn't paying rent and he was the one terrorizing them. It was always their fault. So it's just, there are a lot of people out there that are like that, and they just haven't awakened to that cycle yet at all.
Absolutely. So this one is the one that I think is the most important for us to like touch on, especially with the type of thought podcast that we're going on.
Uh,
And it's the cycle of trauma.
Ooh, that one's a good one. I don't have notes on that. Do tell.
Okay, so you have experienced a trauma in your life, whether it was some sort of abuse while you were a child, maybe it's a car wreck, maybe it's, oh, maybe I live in Oklahoma and we have lots of tornadoes. Maybe you have had trauma from a tornado. Any of those things. And so every time you get in the car, you have a panic attack, especially if you're on the highway or on a similar highway to where that car wreck happened. Or you are watching the news and you have absolutely just had an absolute panic attack because they are doing a tornado watch. And you've got the kids and you're in the storm cellar or you're in the bathroom with the pillows and the blankets and you're having a panic attack over that. Then there, the cycle of trauma where it's coming from, you have an abuse that you've been triggered on. And there is something that has triggered you in the real world, not necessarily because you're being traumatized again, but it's something that reminds you of the trauma. And so you have a reaction. Those are all cycles. Though the universe is going to keep putting you in those same situations time after time after time after time after time again, because every single time that it comes around is an opportunity for growth. And that opportunity for growth comes in, how do I recognize that I'm being triggered by this action or this cause, whatever has happened? How do I change my reaction so that I notice it, but I don't react to it in quite the same way? And that's what it's every single time that that trigger comes around for you, it's an opportunity for you to change and heal on your own. And that way that whenever it comes back around, it's a little less. And it comes back around again, it's a little less until it gets to that point where it's just a little pinpoint and oh yeah, that used to bother me, but it doesn't anymore. That happened to me once, but doesn't bother me anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What you're talking about pretty much is something I've taken a while back. It was prolonged exposure. And it's part of trauma work where you expose yourself to the things that do trigger you and force yourself to stay where that thing is that triggers you safely, of course. We're not talking about putting yourself in danger in order to get used to this trauma feeling that you have. This is stuff like as a veteran, I had a very hard time going to Walmart. It overwhelmed me. There was always so many people. I feel like I can't get to an exit fast enough if I'm in a certain part of the store. There's a lot of hangups that I had within the grocery store. So this is something I can change. It's a trigger. So I would have to go to the grocery store during prolonged exposure, and I had to go to whatever aisle made me the most nervous, and I had to sit there. If my emotional response was at like 100%, if I went 0 to 100% in fear, then I had to sit there until it came down 50%. If I was at 80% in an emotional response, I had to wait until I was down to 40%. It had to come down by half before I could walk out of the store, which posed a whole nother trigger because I don't like walking out of the store without buying anything. Sometimes I'll buy something just to walk out of the store because I always feel like I'm stealing something. I don't know why, because I'm not stealing anything, but I have this fear of walking out without buying anything. So it was a whole nother thing I had to face just trying to get out of the store. So do you know how silly I looked doing my therapy homework by standing in the cleaning aisle at Walmart, staring at the shelves, pretending I'm shopping for like 20, 30 minutes sometimes before my emotional response, that response that makes me want to run away and hide, came down by half. That's prolonged exposure. For anybody who has ever been in therapy, you might have heard of it.
And if you do not take it upon yourself to do prolonged exposure, the universe will find a way to do it for you
And
eventually.
exactly. And here's the thing, that is that type of therapy, even though it is extremely difficult and hard, because a prolonged exposure for me was two parts. One part was doing the external. I had to go out to places that triggered me and sit with my feelings, make them come down by half. But I also had to go into the therapy office and I had to recount the whole trauma in detail while it was being taped and then go home and listen to it every day. I had to listen to it every day. And sometimes I had to recount it twice on that tape. And that I did not necessarily pass prolonged exposure. I kind of told her it was too intense and I needed something else. And I went into a different group that helped me equally as well, but that really did get me used to that, used to the idea that the only way to get over that trauma, not really get over it, but come to terms and accept what happened to me and move beyond these triggering items or these triggering things or events that were happening in my life. I needed to be in them because the more I avoided them, the more I'd never go into them, or the more fear I would build up. Whereas where I kept going back to Walmart and doing the thing that was uncomfortable, eventually it got easy. Now I can go to Walmart. I still get hung up on the leaving to go part. I'll be sitting here going, I really don't want to go. I really don't want to go. But when I'm there, it's not that bad. Don't run into any problems like I've known veterans in the past who get really angry at Walmart and never a fight or anything weird like that. I didn't freak out or anything in the store ever. It was just that it was a very, very uncomfortable place and I would avoid it for as long as I could. Stopping that avoidance, though, is one of the first steps to healing in therapy.
Abuse, there we've talked about cycles of abuse kind of before, but never like broke it down into the cycle of it.
Uh-huh.
It's abuse in itself. Let's break it down to like corporal punishment for families, just to have a good flat line,
Uh-huh.
because obviously there's a multitude of different abuses or whatever. But so that's another cycle, because what do you have? You have, your child has not done something satisfactory to you as far as you're concerned, and you spank them, or um sometimes it's much more than a spanking. Sometimes it is goes extremely too far. And that is ancestral, generational. It's a collective trauma that goes, I mean, goes back to like whipping soldiers into shape, right? We've talked about
Mm-hmm.
that before. So a major cycle of abuse comes from passing down from generation to generation, that I must smack you somehow so that you can understand how you did wrong.
Right. If I smack you, you will learn not to do A, B, or C, or you will wash the dishes better next time. It just
Flush the toilet. Um,
that, yeah, I mean simple things like that. I remember getting in trouble for some silly things when I was growing up, or things that I would perceive that the punishment that I got was probably not. I mean, I understood where they were coming from, but it also isn't right. Studies show that negative enforcement does not promote that child to do right or whatever, because not all children behave the same. Some children will get beat and then they rebel. Eventually, they beat their parent up and then end up at 16 on the street or something like that. Not all children are submissive and go into themselves and just be quiet and take the beating. Not every child is like that. So there's so many differences and variables in that abuse cycle.
yeah, there really are. And it's just like, that it's not, or it is difficult to break that cycle, because I mean, like me, I am breaking that cycle. I do not spank my children. There was a point in time where I thought that that was the answer. I was spanked, so they must be spanked,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, here I am. I had the old adage of, well, I was spanked and I survived and I turned out just fine. But did I?
But did you?
or did that have a profound effect on me as growing up all the way into adulthood? And it does. I mean, because I, even now, there are things that if, like, if a loud noise happens behind me, I jump,
Mhm.
and it's like, I mean, I still to this day can jump out of my skin if I feel that kind of energy coming from like behind me when I can't see it.
Right, right. No, I feel the same because like, for me, it's almost opposite. I'm not jumpy. It's because I thought being quiet and still would save me at night when before my abuse. So I would be super quiet. I wouldn't be jumpy because I needed to pretend to sleep. If I pretend to sleep, maybe my abuse wouldn't happen and I'd be safe that night. But that never happened. But I still had it in my head. So even now, like I can recall there was a time when I was in the military and I lived in some apartments and I went to bed one night after like a party in the foyer or the middle part of all the apartments because it was like horseshoe shaped. I went to bed and I like fell asleep and I opened my eyes maybe about an hour and a half later and there was somebody standing in my doorway. Now my husband was TDY at that time. So he wasn't at home and all of these people knew that. So when I saw somebody standing in my doorway, I didn't jump, I didn't scream, I didn't even react. I just so went, "Hey, what's up?" In which they answered me. As soon as they answered me, I knew exactly who it was. He was drunk as a skunk. Led him back over to his apartment. But that scared the shit out of me. But I didn't react. And I don't react like that normally. Like something bad happens, or, I hear those noises and I'll turn around, but I usually don't jump. And that's like, that's the weird thing. Everybody reacts a little bit different to the traumas that happen to them.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I definitely remember as a kid that I would do everything in my power to avoid a spanking.
Hmm.
Like I, all the way up until getting it, I was screaming and crying because it was made a production. Like if you are getting a spanking, you have to go get the paddle or the belt or
Take your
whatever.
switch.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. There's like this whole thing, and like, honest to goodness, I don't think that they're. I personally look at it and I look back at knowing what I know about the trauma that I suffered as a child. I look back and I go, oh my God, how could my family not see me as this child obviously needs to have some help? And the only that way that we'll be able to do that is, maybe she needs to go talk to somebody, or maybe we need to figure out what's going on. Instead, we get, you just get in more trouble, or, if you run away, you're going to get it twice as bad. Or what's the other one? If you're going to cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Oh gosh, you know what? I've used that one. God, God.
But it was used on you.
I know. That's why I've said it. And, I stopped using it as yeah, and like I said, 12 years ago I entered therapy because I was in a place where I was losing my shit on my kids. And it wasn't even for great reasons either. Like, no, I was just losing my shit because the laundry wasn't put away. That's not a reason to lose your shit. But I was seriously losing my shit. And so that's why I went into therapy, was because I knew my kids didn't deserve that, but for whatever, I couldn't put my finger on how to stop my behavior as in that aspect.
Right. Okay. Ways, do you have any ways to break cycles? I wrote down a couple things, but I think the number one way to break cycles is forgiveness. You and forgiveness, we've talked about this before too, is for you. It's not for the other party. But if you have been, like you and I are talking about, like ways that we thought were okay to raise our children, and then we've had a change of heart. So that would be a point where you need to forgive, or we need to forgive ourselves, because we were acting from a place, we were acting from the place of which we knew at the time. It's okay to be human and make mistakes, as long as you know that you can forgive yourself. And that forgiveness does have to come from yourself, because it's not for the other party, it's for you.
Right. And we're not talking about just forgiveness or it's kind of self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
Now, and what I wanted to add with forgiveness is that that relates to, which is really funny. I'm going to pull out my therapy notes from today's group therapy, but self-compassion. Self-compassion is so important, um, because it's self-kindness, it's the sense of common humanity, and it's mindfulness. Those are the three parts of self-compassion. And that self-kindness, being able to tell yourself that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to feel bad because something fell through. It's okay. And then that's common sense of humanity, is knowing that there are other humans on this earth that are experiencing a tough life like you are, or a tough moment in life. We all experience these moments. And then mindfulness, of course, that's what kind of keeps you together. Mindfulness is, and I will add that in that mindfulness, I would try, when you're shooting for self compassion and forgiveness, to go for a loving kindness meditation, because that will meet the needs of that mindfulness moment, that we all need to take mindfulness moments to check in with ourselves. Forgiveness, um, it's being able to forgive yourself if you think you did wrong, because sometimes, like I've said, I don't remember which podcast it was, but I remember going to a priest and asking for forgiveness once, but he told me everything that I told him that were my sins, I did not inflict on myself. They were all things that happened to me, and that's not how forgiveness works. I needed to forgive myself for treating myself so rough for so long, because all of those things weren't my fault. I was a child, or I was a very young adult, and I was taken advantage of. These things, traumas don't have any rhyme or reason or sense about them. But getting yourself to a place of self-compassion, that's where you'll be able to begin to heal yourself from the traumas that you suffer.
Right. And then another way to break cycles is learning to set boundaries.
Oh, yes.
Because those relationships that just keep coming around are coming around because you see something in all of these people that's the same. And so, therefore, you must be allowing that behavior to walk over the boundary that you should be setting,
Mm-hmm.
or
It,
boundaries with yourself with self talk.
mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Step on your
Uh,
own boundaries.
yeah, boundaries are very important, because if you don't have any boundaries, these people are going to come in and just wreak havoc on your life. When you set healthy boundaries, these people can't wreak havoc on your life. When you allow somebody to come in your life and make your life uncomfortable, I mean, that seems kind of silly. Why? It's like that meme I just saw on Facebook, that if you invited somebody over to your house and they came in and dissed all of your decor and broke stuff and, ate all of your food and dirtied up your house and then left, you wouldn't probably let them back in your house. Now, replace house with your feelings, with your self-respect, with all of the things that you should have the healthy boundaries in place, so that you feel good about yourself. You wouldn't allow somebody to trash your house. Don't let them trash who you are by making you be somebody you don't want to be. And then don't let them make you react. Don't react to somebody who's trying to make you react because clearly there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, that's just simply poking the bear just to see if you get bit.
Yes. And people do it. People do it.
So there's another thing is like, we're talking about cycles, and you have to like imagine it being more like a cyclone where it gets bigger as it circles back out, and it just keeps getting, it's a spiral, it's not linear, right? So the way there's an ebb and a flow, and it's like the laws of the universe, no matter what you're thinking, and there's, when you have a high, there's definitely going to be a low. Spiritually speaking, if you have a really, really like profound spiritual moment happen, there's going to be a time for integration into the body, and then have, so it's up and it's down, and it's up and it's down. So with that being said, I wrote down, you're never stuck. It might feel like you're stuck while you're in the process of moving through the cycle. It may feel like, oh, time is just standing still. I am just not, I'm not doing this. I'm not, it's just, we're still, oh my God, it's just so awful. It's just not, oh, I'm never going to get through this. But instead of it being like that, you're never stuck there. You just need to find the tools to get you through that stagnation feeling. There's something that you can be doing. There's something that you can be working on if you're stuck. Listen for the signs. They're all around you.
Yes. And when you're stuck, I have some tips. If you're stuck in a place where I'm depressed and I can't get out of bed, because I've been in that place many, many times, I still don't expect anything to change. I expect to have that come back eventually. Avoid avoidance. Avoid avoidance. Because if you think to yourself, like I do while I'm sitting there binge watching a show, golly, I really should not be sitting here watching this. I've got so much to do. I should get up and do it. Well, then why don't I get up and do it? I'm avoiding. That's why. So avoid avoidance. I avoid phone calls all the time. I hate phone calls, which is crazy coming from a receptionist and sales assistant for so long, where all I did was make phone calls. And here, I don't like phone calls now. So if anything requires a call, guess what? It's highly unlikely it's going to get done. And it'll take me 2 or 3 months to get things done because I don't want to call. I just don't.
I don't either.
So what I said, avoid avoidance, mindfulness. Mindfulness will keep you present and keep you moving. Um, when you feel like you don't want to do something for yourself, even if it's little something.
Take a
Maybe it's
bath.
painting your toenails. Not if, okay, maybe it's clipping your fingernails because you garden a lot. That's also something you do. I mean, it helps to have trim nails while you're digging in the dirt. That might be something that you do for yourself. Maybe it's giving yourself a pedicure. Um, treat yourself like you would treat a loved one or a child. We tend to treat our loved ones very kindly. If you're not treating yourself that way, you get stuck in these spirals of depression, these spirals and cycles of self talk abuse. That's how we get stuck. So, if you try to take a different look at yourself or treat yourself as you would treat these loved ones in your life, that might help you make that switch to talk a little nicer. It helped me to at least catch it. Maybe you need to connect with your inner child. Maybe Get a picture of yourself as a child and pull it out and look at yourself in a child as a child, and then ask yourself if maybe you're being too hard on yourself for whatever you're beating yourself up for, because that's usually why we're stuck in depression. We're beating ourselves up for something. And then one last tip is a self-compassion break, which is just acknowledging that maybe times are really tough right now, and just voicing it out. You know what? Times are really tough right now, but I'm going to be okay because in the past, I have always been okay in the end. And that's a self truth and kind of a self mantra to have.
Absolutely. I have like a couple more I thought of while you were talking, and it's make lists.
Oh, yes.
Make lists, to-do lists, whatever. Start, it doesn't matter if it's like, today as to-do list, brush teeth, brush hair, put on mascara, eat breakfast, take my vitamins, yada yada yada. The other one is like to actually make yourself a schedule. Like it's 8 a.m. It's time to brush my teeth.
Hmm.
It's 9 a.m. It's time to, take out the garbage. It's, just simple time. And maybe it's noon and it's time to make the bed. It does not matter what it is. It's just the act of doing and being able to cross those off that makes you feel accomplished. And so
Yep.
you can add more to those as you wish, or you could take stuff off like, okay, well now I get it, like brushing my teeth is that's part of my routine, obviously. I don't have to have that on my list. But if you're just getting started and it's like I'm having a hard time coming up with, things to even fill out my day, there you go.
There
Schedule
you
in
go.
there, an hour to watch Netflix if you want.
Right, right. Scheduling things are so important. You know what? If you forget, set a timer. Like I, for a while, had a meditation timer on my phone daily that at this time every day, I'm going to sit for 10 minutes and meditate. But if I didn't have that timer on, I wouldn't do it because I'd forget about it. So I had to have that timer until it became a habit. As soon as it becomes a habit, then it's much easier to maintain that habit. But that leads me to another cycle that I'm excited to share with you because are you aware there is a cycle of change?
What?
The cycle of
Hmm.
change is actually like when you go to make a change, say, I want to start speaking kinder to myself. So I obviously needed to make a change. I needed to change the language I was using with myself, but I also was not always aware that I was beating myself up. When I sat down, when I first entered therapy, I was challenged to write down all of my negative thoughts that I had during the day. Oh, God, that was a very long day of writing and a very long list of negative thoughts that I brought in. I think it was like 2 pages. And I couldn't stop myself from thinking them. They would just come so quickly, and I was engrossed in them because they were my thoughts, and my thoughts are true, right? No, your thoughts aren't true. So, cycle of change. The first step is pre contemplation. Nothing's wrong with me. That's the first step. There's nothing wrong with me. You haven't recognized it. It's like outside of the cycle itself, kind of. And the step two is contemplation. Ah, something might be wrong with me. Step three is preparation. That's when you break out the phone book and look for a doctor or look online and Google um, and start making appointments because when you call to maybe you decided, you know what, I need some mental health professional to help me. Well, it's going to take a minute to set an appointment with somebody, to find somebody, to make sure you have health insurance. All of that stuff is preparation. That's that step right there. Step four is action. That's when you're actively making the change. So now you are probably in therapy, you're probably in group therapies or some type of therapy that challenges your thoughts. So, cognitive process, what's it called? Cognitive process therapy, and then dialectical behavioral therapy. Those are those therapies that challenge your thoughts and the way you look at the world. So you're in action if you're doing those things. Step 5 is maintenance. That's you're sustaining the change now. You have a new behavior that replaces the old behavior. So now you're catching those thoughts and you're telling yourself 3 positive thoughts instead. You're actively maintaining this new habit that you've developed. Now, step 6 happens and it's okay. It's relapse. Relapse is when you fall back to your old pattern or your old habit. Say you make the change for a week and you sustain it for a week, but then you're like, oh, you catch yourself going into the spirals of dark thoughts again. Well, you just relapsed and you are already in the action or you're in the maintenance. So go back up to action. Relapse can happen at any point in that cycle of change. Relapse could happen in the middle of preparation and you never make it to the doctor. It could happen at contemplation and then you end up maybe right back at pre-contemplation where there's no problem with me. Relapse can happen. And it's not the end of the world. You just have to get back up and start trying again. The moment you give up is the moment that you're doing yourself the disservice because you never truly fail at anything if you take what you learned from your experience and keep trying to move forward. That's the point of life. That's the point of spirituality. That's the point of fixing all of your mental health is remembering that it's okay to stumble and fall down. All you have to do is just get right back up and try again because we all stumble and fall in the midst of making changes in our life. Have you ever had that diet that you fell right off of because you just couldn't maintain it? That's part of this cycle of change. And I'm so glad I got to share it with you.
Yeah, that makes me think of like that's an energetic change, right? That's you are changing the processes that are
Hmm.
within your psyche, right? There's
Yeah.
also like in on the physical, there's another way to look at it too, is that your body is constantly changing.
Hmm.
You are constantly growing new cells and new and old cells are dying off. You are constantly shedding skin, whatever. And every 7 years, every cell in your body is new.
Hmm.
So every 7 years, you have changed. You are completely different. You are completely new. So it's like another like it's a rebirth in a way. And every 7 years, that you have the chance for
I wish I
that.
knew where I was in that process because I'm feeling really old. Come
Well, it's
on,
like
new cells kick in or something.
what is it? It's is it 40? I think. Or is it 42? It's
Four.
every 7 years, so it's 7, 14, 28.
Oh, we're mathing. Yeah, I don't do math. I can't help you.
I'm not the math expert. My kid can like puts me to shame whenever I'm
Hey,
like,
once upon a time in the 5th grade, I was a wizard at my times tables, but I got nothing now. Nothing. Nothing in the noggin. Not
that every
mathematical.
7 years those cells change, those brain cells that went and done and left you. Sorry.
Boy, I have been eating crap if I didn't replace my cells with good cells.
Math, use it or lose it.
Uh,
I don't math either. It's okay. No problems.
yeah.
What else have we got on cycles?
Well, that was my last thing was sharing the cycle of change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's all I got too. all I'm worried about now is
Well,
mathing. Why are we
just
mathing?
right, exactly. So, just okay, so here's the overall overview of today is that cycles are all around us. They're not linear cycles. They don't usually have a close. They continue on because we always, like you said, run into the same energy, different meat suit. It's what happens because we're all energy and we attract like energy to us. So, with that on cycles, maybe ask yourself, what cycle am I stuck in? Am I stuck in an internal cycle that's damaging to myself? Am I stuck in an external cycle that's damaging to myself? Am I in a relationship that's toxic? Am I living in a toxic way? You know, all of these things are in our lives if we really look. And I challenge you to find yourself in that cycle of change in whatever cycle you're in, because you can be anywhere in that cycle of change. And all it takes is that small change and a building of a habit. So it's not easy, but I challenge you to take a look.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably one of the hardest things is to turn that judgment inward, or
Mhm.
that judgment isn't the word that I want to use.
Comparison.
That's a good one. That and you have there that criticalness that you are put out onto the world, and take it and turn it back onto yourself and go, where am I and what can I do to help myself get out of this situation that I'm stuck in?
Exactly, because only you have the power to change what is going on with you. You can't change what's going on around you 9 times out of 10. It's just not possible. However, there's always something within yourself that only you can change. And people can't even tell you about it. You have to come to it yourself and make the change yourself. So take a look in a book. No, not a book, a mirror.
Ugh. Hey, there's lots of mirrors around you all day long. You just got to look over to the next meat suit.
Yep.
That's your mirror.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are no mistakes. So, it's like whenever you go to the restaurant, or you go to a restaurant and you had bad service one time and you refuse to go back to that restaurant because I had bad service. There's terrible service there. Well, but how about you go back and you try and see if it's just you creating that, or if it's something that if it's true, or and if not, if it's not true, then you can start to like be like, well, what is it about me that made my experience so awful?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, you know, and I will attest to myself and how awful I have made my life by just accepting the way things were, because I didn't have to accept things the way they were. I just needed to make the change. But the change was scary to make because it leads to the unknown. And I know what to expect with this behavior. So I'll just keep doing it and dealing with the aftermath. But that dealing with the aftermath of that behavior was miserable every single time. And it just kept getting worse until finally I forced myself to take a look at myself and go, oh, I guess I'm kind of creating these situations because I don't have the proper boundary for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm like thinking about being stuck in the cycle of reacting to everything on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so awful. Oh my gosh, this is so awful. Oh my gosh, this is so. Can you believe what? Oh my goodness. And it's just like that right there is a cycle that you can get stuck in that keeps you from being able to That's a negative cycle. Like
Mhm.
the news itself is very negative and keeps you in the loop, and it
It's
keeps going
it's
around, and you're
designed to be sensational. The news is supposed to catch you and make you watch, and that's what it's
a
designed to do. Trick.
emotional response.
Mhm.
They want the emotional response. So you are literally paying your energy as currency. So, like, I say this all the time, you get what you're paying for.
Mhm.
If you, what you, your focus is your energy. That is the energy is the currency.
Exactly. And if you've ever read the book, um, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Hansen, it is a wonderful book, but think of it as I have X amount of fucks to give. Well, I can give it to this, I can give it to this, I can give it this, but eventually I'm going to run out of fucks. And I need to hoard those because I need them. I need them for the important stuff in my life that I really need to pay attention to. And if I'm giving them all over the place for stuff that doesn't even affect me, I mean, it affects me if it's news, I get it. But there is a way to be informed about the news without having to watch the display that the news puts on for you. You can find media sources. Read the news. Don't watch the news. Watching the news is designed to make you watch the news, which means it's sensational. Read it instead. Find a source that you trust and read your news instead of watching it, and it will change the response you have. You won't be so easily and quickly over responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I call it just catching the cliff notes.
Yes.
I
Just
read the
let me know
highlights.
exactly. Let me know the important stuff. I don't need to hear about the sensational stuff.
I mean, because obviously all of that stuff affects the collective.
Mhm.
All obviously all of it does. But there's like again, you can give your acknowledgement without giving your energy.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a
And
very,
that's
very possible to do.
and that's what spirituality is really all about is protecting your energy, keeping it safe and being responsible with your energy and how you share it with others.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%.
All right.
Okay. Yeah,
Well, I think we covered it. So, do you want to plug or do you want me to plug?
I can. So that's about all, folks.
Waka waka.
No, in all seriousness, you can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on just about any podcast platform that there is out there right now. We have a website, towhichisle.com. We have emails, which is Charmaine at towhichisle.com or Krystle at towhichisle.com. And as always, we want you to take what resonates and leave the rest. Love and light.
Yes, yes. So love and light. And until next time, friends.